Bob Tess. I'm the Chief Finance and Business Services Officer of the Wausau School District. We're getting some questions about a pair of referendum questions on April 6th and the associated tax impact of such. I'd like to spend some time talking about different scenarios. What you see on the screen here is a pair of graphs. The one on top represents the entire tax levy that the district asks of its taxpayers. The bottom represents the corresponding mill rate. The mill rate is the amount of tax per $1,000 of equalized value. You'll also notice that as part of the strategy for the referendum being proposed on April 6th, it represents a flat tax levy going forward with the assumption that the general fund is remaining relatively flat and state funding formulas don't change. And it also represents a continuation of a reduction in mill rate. The mill rate has gone down for the last few years. Under the proposed referendum scenario, the mill rate would continue a decline over the next several years. We've gotten some questions about what would happen with a no vote on both referendum questions. And what will happen is more than likely a sequence of events, and we'll take them one at a time. First of all, if question number 1 were to fail, you'll see the amber part of the graph go away. That represents question 1. If question 2 were to fail, the green part of the graph would disappear. We wouldn't have to borrow the money. That would be roughly $13.5 million of spending that would not happen in 21-22. And when that happens, state aid, and we're funded at a 22% rate on state aid would also disappear the following year. So we would have a lost aid impact that you would see the year after the spending goes down. So failed referendum, spending goes down. The following year, state aid goes down. So the corresponding levy would need to go up to make up for lost aid, and the corresponding mill rate on the bottom would also need to go up. So in this likely sequence of events, this would be something the board would have to consider to avoid the loss in aid and to get back on track for a stable, steadily declining mill rate, eliminate the loss of aid, and instead choose to prepay some remaining callable or prepayable debt that we have in the future. You can see a little bit of gray in 27. There's also a little bit in 25, 26. Some of it lives beyond 2030. But if we called or paid that debt, we would allow taxes to go down a little bit. We would get back on track with a stable, slightly declining mill rate for one more year, and the board would contemplate another referendum question. Because a failed referendum question, even though eventually it means a decrease in your taxes, it also represents unmet needs. And those unmet needs are a real thing. We have needs in our buildings. We have needs for our students that need to be met. The board would be wise to consider another referendum. So after we prepay debt in 2021, if we go to referendum and that referendum succeeds, the mill rate and the corresponding levy would go up a little bit because inflation would take its toll after one more year. Interest rates would take their toll after one more year. The exact set of projects would cost a little bit more a year later. If that referendum were to fail, we're left with that same decrease in spending, causes the following year a decrease in state aid, and if there's a decrease in state aid in 23, what will happen? Local taxes and local mill rate would need to go up to offset the loss in state aid. At that point, we wouldn't have any more prepayable debt remaining. We would not be able to continue the strategy that we've been in the midst of since 2017. A failed referendum at that point would mean the taxes would go down. The next year, the taxes would go up because of the lost aid, and we would also have unmet needs. That's something that's important to keep in mind because the buildings have needs, the students have needs, and eventually we do have to address those needs, most likely with an eventual successful referendum.